What's up? This is the Social Primate Podcast. Today our guest is Rob Burt. What's up, man? I haven't seen you in a couple of months now.
Yeah. Been a while, man.
Or
yeah, it was like St. Patrick's Day, like
yeah, that's
2016.
right, last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been more than a year. He was a guest on one of the other podcasts that I help host, Live Locos, and now he's on here. We're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the weird, chaotic stuff that's been going on the last couple of months since Trump became president.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I believe one of the topics that we were talking about earlier today was about the so-called rise of the alt-right. Yeah. You know, and for a lot of people that don't know who the alt-right is, how can we explain it? It's like
the alt-right, it's essentially this movement that was claims to be born out of, the 4chan boards.
The 4chan boards, yeah.
The Pepe the Frog, Kekistan group, They claim to be, the counterculture or the response to the social justice movement that, has taken place in America. But, what we kind of see beneath this surface is just this long-running undercurrent of racially motivated political moves, This is essentially just the same racist undercurrent has kind of like hijacked, as they say, this movement. But, one could argue that those undercurrents have always been there, and it's based on this idea of normalizing an attitude toward someone, or controlling the way that a certain group is seen. But it's essentially the normalization of racist policies, of policies that are specifically then designed to suppress groups that they find undesirable. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing less than the white nationalist movement rebranded for the meme age.
The meme age.
Yeah.
Perfect way to represent that age. But yeah, it's true. Like you said earlier, it's the counterculture to the social justice movement that's been going on in the last couple of years. These movements have kind of always been there. Yeah. It comes like in little cycles here and there. One time, I was on Facebook, one of the articles, and I'm not the type of person to comment on the boards because I really don't like getting into it. I just like kind of just observing.
Yeah. But
this particular time, I responded to somebody there because I legitimately wanted to know their opinion as to why they were reacting to, in this case, it was sanctuary cities. I legitimately wanted to know, like, why is it that it affects you? Why does it affect you? And the only way that they responded back was calling me ignorant and saying that I don't have enough. I wouldn't have to be asking those kind of stupid questions if I was involved in the city politics. And I was like,
yeah.
I mean, okay, I understand that part, but I mean, I'm actually just trying to find out your reasoning for it. Trying to have a conversation with you, and it feels like some of them don't. They kind of just have their mindset on something specific already.
Well, especially when, for the longest time, the image of America, especially to migrant families, was this idea of this place that you can go and pursue this American dream, and you have a place to live, and you have a house, and all of, like, that's been a long-standing, image of America globally in general. Obviously, not so much now. I mean, people are like pouring out of this country. People aren't even visiting this country. Like it's very interesting to see this response globally, even to what's occurred.
People from these, again, I don't want to divide people into certain groups, but they have like these set of American values that are some extreme version of American values.
Yeah,
and it's scary because they're not open to conversation. They're really closed-minded. I feel like I'm just judging them now.
It's a nativism that is essentially found in any country. There's a nativism that this place belongs to you. Yeah. It's a kind of it's a loyalty to the country, but it's interesting in that they ignore the image of America being this bastion for people who have nowhere else to go, can rebuild their life. They both seem to like embrace the nationalism, the kind of national symbols,
Yeah.
like the all-American symbols, while rejecting some of the things that seem to be like fundamental to its core, about, helping, immigrants, about being, good God, the Statue of Liberty, and it's the idea that we're a nation of immigrants and that suddenly we're all full up and we can't have anybody else. It's kind of astounding to see them have that attitude when everything else about them is so wrapped up in, the idea of America.
There's videos that I've seen, everybody has cell phones now. So you're going to, every other day you're seeing a video of some weird, random human act. There was a video of some lady in Canada. She was a white lady in a hospital clinic, and she was demanding to see a white doctor.
Yeah.
And I guess everybody there was from India or, I'm not sure where they were from, but, to her, they were not white.
Yeah.
So,
So she refused. She essentially refused care for her child. I read about this. Yes, she essentially refused care for her child because there wasn't a white doctor to see her son.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's interesting to see how through Trump and the way that he speaks and the kind of things that he represents, we have this kind of emboldened sense that people get to say whatever they want. It's interesting because, they definitely elected this man on the idea that he was an outsider, that he didn't talk like politicians, that he talked like one of us, while kind of giving him a free pass on all of these, definite red flags. But they seem to, completely forget the fact that if you act like that, if you have those beliefs, everybody else can criticize you for having that belief. It's that they definitely rally around the idea of free speech. I have free speech. I'm allowed to say this. Well, of course, yes, you are allowed to say this, and everyone else is allowed to say something back to it too. And that's kind of just how this mess works.
You have to be understanding, first of all, because like you said, if you want to be heard, you have to expect that pushback, and vice versa. If you're trying to hinder somebody from speaking, then you obviously have to expect for them to try to keep you quiet. The Berkeley stuff that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
They started Richard Spencer, the guy who's supposedly the top alt-right dude, the leader of
He's
something.
famous for being punched in the face, if I remember.
Exactly, that guy. So this guy, he's trying to hold rallies, in Berkeley, and they've been shutting him down. I think the same with Kelly Conaway. I think she was trying to go on there.
Maybe. I want to say Ann Coulter was trying to come
Oh, yeah,
through
Ann
Berkeley.
Coulter.
Yeah.
They look the same.
But she eventually, she pulled out of it, too.
She pulled out of it.
Over student protests.
And that other guy, Milo, from Breitbart as well.
Yeah.
They shut him down because they started
Yes.
getting crazy up there. But, once again, I respect the idea of protesting. I've done my share of walking out and, going down to downtown and stuff. But I don't believe that's the right way to go about it either, because you're shutting them down. And that only creates that same sentiment that they're being left out, they're being quieted, and why we have Trump now.
Well, and it's also demonstrating the kind of censorship then that is being created around words. I mean, this is definitely a very interesting time in that people are paying attention to what, people are finally understanding that their words have consequences. Yeah. Especially with the internet never forgetting anything. But to see this come to a head in that, we have an administration that can say one thing and do another thing. It's interesting that we have hit a point where people are supposed to be held accountable to what they say, but I don't know, you can't necessarily, it's created a mob mentality. And these people have kind of created almost the sense of a scarlet letter placed on a person, and they want this public shaming of a person because of what they believe. it's such a sticky situation in that you can kind of see how this is suppressing speech, though that speech is, pretty reprehensible.
I mean, what do you do then? I mean, there has to be a balance, and I think once again, because because as in we, but as a group, like we mentioned, Democrats and Republicans, the left and the right, they've become like their own teams, like regardless of what it is, red, blue, and that's
it's almost like a sports rivalry at this point. Like, we're not, like, with some of the actions that Trump is doing, almost like repealing a water protection or talking about opening up national parks for mining. These are, direct responses to the last 8 years of Obama's policies. Like, he is actively attacking all of these things.
Yeah.
And it is almost this sense of trying to roll back like the ball. It's like they have the ball now and they're trying to, gain yardage again.
Yeah.
But it's insane that it's being done almost entirely out of spite.
That's what it feels like, right? Like it feels like that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to roll back a lot of the Obama era policies that were implemented. But at the same time, I don't understand as to why. I mean, but once again, it's the mentality, that the 50s mentality with the coal mining and all this.
Yeah.
Like, come on. I mean, and a lot of the jobs that he's promising all these people,
they're still disappearing. They're going
to be automated. Everything's going to automation.
Yeah. And, I believe Ford just agreed to send a bunch of jobs
to Mexico.
Exactly. Yeah. Mexico, and I believe some to China. Like, these jobs are still disappearing. Mm-hmm. And then, you have the instances of the coal miners that are now being told that, like, they're having, dangerous safety regulations stripped away so that they can get in there and get more coal. While at the same time, they're the ones who are going to lose the most in Medicaid cuts and in, the dismantling of the Affordable Care Act.
I want to go back really quick to, like, the, so-called rise of this alt-right group. A lot of the information that I've seen online, it doesn't, they try to put it, maybe that's how they really feel. They feel like they're not racist, but they're trying to stop themselves from being shut down. Like I said, again, with the Berkeley stuff, it's been there, right? It's been dormant.
It hasn't necessarily been dormant. You still saw images of, racial hate and tension throughout the majority of the Obama years. Like, there's always been that kind of simmering anger, like, in this country especially. It's always been there. It just necessarily hasn't been given the same amount of attention, I feel, as it has now, with kind of this rebranded, meme conscious type of movement that, is, of course, very much hijacked in some ways now by nationalist movements, by white supremacist movements that are increasing actually under the Trump administration so far. But it's giving them a way to normalize the way that they think to a broader audience. It's a way to kind of get their message into, a meme, like 8 words and a joke. Like, it's a way to normalize a lot of their ideas. And you see this almost with every type of political ideology now in general. You can find a meme for pretty much any slant on anything. But it's interesting to see this meme culture be a way then that they broaden their audience. A year ago, nobody knew who Pepe the Frog was, and now everybody knows about him.
Yep. And
to the point of absurdity then, even with the whole Kekistan movement and the way that they, portray themselves as being a persecuted minority, under the normie regime, as they say. But it's just a way to make this more accessible to a wider audience and even a younger audience than too.
So do you think because I feel like I started hearing the term alt-right during the 2016 general election cycle, right? So obviously this had to start because of Trump, because he was the guy, the beginning of the Republican, all the people running. He was a guy right from the beginning, with a big mouth. He was expressing himself. He was not afraid of these political sensitive, terms. So I think I don't know. I want to say that it started with with Pepe. I feel like it started as a joke, to just kind of piss off the left.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's kind of this just snarky, ironic, like, it is. It's a taunt more than anything, but it's a taunt that as a joke just kept growing in steam. Like,
and now it's like serious. It's like, a lot of people like, the incident in Oregon with the subway, like these people are taking, like, I mean, before that you'll still see the occasional racist person on the bus or on the train, ranting at somebody or screaming at someone, but it just feels like there's so much, what you see from recordings, you see a lot more hate, like, towards those, the way they're voicing their, not concerns or whatever you want to call it. It feels real, like there's something inside that's really been boiling there for some time.
It's that the information age has given way to the age of outrage now. I mean, now we're all connected, and we've discovered that we are pissed off about everything. Like, it's interesting to see, well, especially in America now, because I mean, politics have always been divided. They've always been very divisive, but there hasn't been this bad of a political division, I would say, since, probably, the 1960s, probably like the anti-war movement, the peacenik movement. I mean, it's interesting to see everything be this heightened, with almost no with almost no recourse. It's everybody is connected now, and everybody is claiming, this social justice stance. Like, this is a very popular stance in our culture as a whole, but we don't necessarily lobby for any real change. I mean, there was just the Philando Castile verdict,
right? Just a few days ago.
Yeah. In which they, I believe they were acquitted. There was another case as well. I cannot remember. It's awful, but there's been another thing happening in that a lot of these families are also taking settlements from the department then, which is a way, I realize, that they have been stalling any real change in the system, because they throw a couple $1 million at these families.
Right. And most of the time these families are low income families.
Yeah, they're very poor, of course. It's almost cyclical. Yeah. But it's interesting to see that, like, some of these cases, that is why they fall apart. Like the case of, what was it, Sandra Bland in Texas. Yeah. Their family ended up taking a settlement. That's why that case disappeared. It's interesting to see this machine, like, systematically target, like, the exact same situation, like, over and over again. That was the one that the family just, I believe, took a settlement for. The kid in Chicago, the 17-year-old who was shot by police.
17-year-old.
It was Laquan, I want to say. Laquan.
I can't recollect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awful. The point is that it was another instance where, like, this kid refused to drop a knife. They shot him 16 times.
Fuck.
But the family ended up taking a settlement, and then I believe nothing really happened. Like, that has been the pattern for, decades now. Yeah. But it's interesting to see everybody claim this stance on social justice, yet these incidences keep occurring without any real recourse.
Right, exactly. Without them having, I mean, because, I mean, you can't say they don't take action because they rally up in the streets, and they try to, protest, but that can only go so far, and it's, like you said, they're not really pushing from some sort of reform, like, what is it, reform it?
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, why? The lack of money? Is it the lack of the people who have the knowledge? I mean, it will have to be with money, right?
It's normally the money. I mean, they throw several $1 million at these families to, avoid them, say, in a civil case.
Yeah.
Which normally comes with a gag order then too. I mean, like, these things are very, very common. This type of, like,
those are fucking crazy.
Buyout. Yeah. Like, there's been cases of fracking, I know, that resulted in, like, a family's children were sickened by water that was poisoned by fracking.
Yeah.
That was all we're really allowed to know because they took a massive payout because the kids needed, like, a lot of care.
So they paid them off.
Yeah, like, this has become, like, a climate where these type of things are actively being, like, suppressed by the absence of wealth in some cases, like primarily, well, especially with most families that this type of stuff doesn't end up going to court.
I mean, first of all, they can't even afford the lawyers to fight these big companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course go ahead and settle instead.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, like I know we went a little far off the topic there, but the idea that there's no systems being implemented, like the social justice movement. Like, yeah, there is, like, the, what is it called? What is it? ACULA, or what is it?
ACLU?
Yeah. They're pushing for these type of reforms and, to a certain extent, but they're only getting so far, you know? And it's like, why? I mean, why isn't there more support for these type of movements when there is many of the people who, like you said, say that they stand with what's going on, against it, but yet they lack the initiative to make action.
They lack the initiative, but they also lack the representation. I mean, we've definitely hit a point where what the glass ceiling almost for changing the political structure, it's money. If you don't have the money, then you cannot even begin to get into politics. And it's I would say a lot of social reform, a lot of actual changes to the system are normally not made because there's not really anything monetarily there to be gained.
Yeah.
That's when you get it, hitting a boiling point and eventually something is changed, like the civil rights movement. Like, those rights wouldn't have been allowed if it wasn't federally mandated, to be so.
Yeah.
The disparity became so bad that it had to be actually changed. That's when the change normally tends to happen. If you look at the way that legislation is treated that favors a certain industry or allows certain business, there is a disparity in how that change is made. If you have a lobby, you normally are able to get some sort of change implemented, and the problem is that we as a nation are so diverse that it's very hard to get even any one group represented as a whole in general.
Exactly right, for like a massive amount of people.
Yeah.
But it's true, yeah. I mean, it's for one person to represent different, cultures or, it is difficult.
Yeah.
Especially.
Well, America has, of course, only grown more diverse. That is primarily where you see, a reaction like the alt-right coming from, is the country is changing again, and this is hard. It's hard to deal with. Yeah. Change is always difficult to deal with.
You think it's like just a resistance to that change?
It is a resistance to that change. It's also, a reaction to the last 8 years of progressive, what was seen as progressive, left-wing politics domestically, but, internationally, we could say that's an entirely different story. It was kind of more of the same. But it's a reaction to change, just like the 60s, was a reaction to this very massive social domestic change. And, you know, the thing is that with the, yeah, I would say, you know, the latest advancement in civil rights, you know, being homosexual marriage, and being the fact that we are actually being able to have protections, you know, for gay people in, you know, in workplaces. I mean, that's not even a statewide thing. In some states, they still don't technically have it on the books that you can't be fired, you know, for that reason. That you can't necessarily be fired for being gay. These actions have been, you know, perceived by people who aren't ready necessarily for that social change. That's why they, you know, voted for a candidate like Trump. One was arguing for...
There was two sides to it. So Clinton, what was her thing? That for social advancement, or, you know, for progressive ideas, supposedly. You know, but to the point where government was more involved as well.
Yeah.
And Trump, on the other hand, he was trying to relate to the people. You know, he'll address them, you know, the group that was left out, you know, for the last 8 years. You know, he was able to use that sentiment to his advantage, and in a way shape.
He was something familiar to people who had been through too much change.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what, like, the reaction is right now in this country, is like the country changed very dramatically from the financial fallout, and then socially as well. And that's kind of scared, you know, that very small population that was not ready to change, that is still, you know, trapped in a 1950s kind of idea for America. But, you know, it's 1950s for, like, all the wrong type of reasons.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a reaction to being felt that they were pushed too far.
Yeah, but at this point, it's just getting kind of extreme. I mean, like, on top of the fact that Trump is trying to, you know, all this fake news, freedom of the press, you know, trying to control what is being released out to the public, and when it's being released.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that in itself has so much influence, you know, especially over the group of people who don't have that much access to the overall information. You know,
yeah.
I mean, internet access is available to the majority of the country, but there's a lot of places that don't have the speeds that you can, you know, use at other places at.
Yeah.
So, like, that in itself restricts that information from being passed out. And not to mention, you know, like, you get into your own little bubble, especially in your own little online world and stuff.
Absolutely. It's like, it's very easy to get isolated socially from various, you know, world views. I mean, it's very, very common now, especially on, you know, social media. It caters to your tastes to begin with. That's, you know, why you have the phenomenon with what happened with, you know, a lot of Clinton's core supporters just being blindsided on election night. Yeah. It does create this kind of information vacuum, but it's fascinating now to see the two, one of the extremes of an information vacuum be in control of the country.
Yeah.
While the other information vacuum is still a part of that media, but is now, you know, trying to be used as a target, like CNN is, to discredit all type of news that disagrees with the administration. Like the fact that we have a president who tweets about fake news it's not normal. It's very not. It is something that should concern most people. I mean, it's bad for the country that we have a president that can be provoked over Twitter in general.
Right.
I mean,
140 characters. It's all it takes for, you know.
He's contradicted his own administration's message
Right.
via Twitter, which is just, it's almost mind-boggling
Exactly.
to even comprehend that.
You know, they'll go on national TV to make these announcements, or like these with the Comey thing, with the letter that he sent, and now the information that came out after that. It's like all this contradictory information that he himself is putting himself. He's shooting himself in the foot.
He's ending up discrediting his own administration through things that are just outright lies. Like he's been caught several times in things that are just blatantly not true.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that he's been able to influence at least a good portion into thinking then too that like, no, they are completely being ostracized and nobody believes what they're saying, when they're even being fed things that are completely not true. Like, and it's not to say that this doesn't necessarily happen on the left as well, but like the core like Trump support right now, it's trying to engage with them is terrifying in its own way.
Yeah.
Because we've hit a point where no, we can't talk to each other about anything like that. Because it's just an outright lie, apparently.
And then, like you said earlier, like the mob mentality, it only takes is a group of people to just start, believing this kind of stuff, or like influencing each other as to what they believe, and it starts growing. So once again, it becomes like this group, left or right, whatever you're talking about, but it becomes closed-minded, and then mob mentalities, it's known that, once that happens, it's just like you have a fucking bullseye just in front of you, like tunnel vision, and you're just going to follow through with what you...
Yeah, it's essentially like when, moral code then breaks down in society is in a mob mentality. It's the idea then that there is, a person or a group of people that you can do this type of thing to.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, right? Very recently then it has been people who make these massive like social missteps primarily. I mean, you can point to Colin Kaepernick being somebody who has been, ostracized in that sense. You can point to Kathy Griffin as another person who has been ostracized in that sense. You can see that like there is this rush to shame and get an apology. Johnny Depp is another really big example
the guy
of this.
wanted to assassinate.
Yeah. He made a joke about assassinating Trump, and now people are calling to boycott Disney. They want him fired. Like, it's interesting to see that, this is kind of it does all boil down to like First Amendment rights in a lot of sense. Like, you kind of see that it is like you do have the right to say whatever you want, and you have a picture of you with the president's head in your hand. You want to kneel instead of put your hand over the heart. Like, you have the right to do these things, but you also have the right to you don't have the right from being criticized then for these things. But what's interesting is that we're seeing that criticism on all sides now being taken to, like, we want retribution for it.
Yeah, like there has to be payback. Like, they have to...
Something is owed for it. Yeah. Like,
it's dangerous because, I mean, again, to the UC Berkeley protests, they've gotten violent. Some guy started hitting people with a fucking bike lock on the head.
Jeez.
And it's like, excuse me. And it's like, okay, well, that's just going to feed until somebody else is going to see that and say, hey, those guys are doing it. We're going to start doing it. Yeah. Next thing you know, you're going to have that violent clash that, that tends to happen before these major changes occur. But... I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe we have to have these clashes happen. Maybe it's just...
All of this does boil down to the rhetoric that, like, this country has been fed for the last, couple of decades here. The us versus them mentality. Mm-hmm. And, what you see then with people ending up in these little, isolated social pockets on social media and stuff is, you just see complete tribalism at its finest almost. Yeah. Like, you see people...
It's so refined and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of just made it easier for, the band to come together. But, like, in this rush to hold people accountable, it's we haven't figured out what's the next step after we hold the person accountable, and it's given way to, like, I don't know, this kind of extremism, this living in a, like, cultural a vacuum, like, and I don't know, it feeds in then to what keeps, anything, well, what keeps us at each other's throat and not after the people who are then, actively...
Who are the ones responsible for the situations?
Absolutely. Like, you wanted the internet to, bring people together, but what it's done is it's brought people together. It's made them understand that they're still pissed off, and people are still gonna hate each other, and people are still gonna not get along. But it's interesting to see that, like, the culture has been taken to that we want to see people held accountable, which then has now given way to acts of violence,
online bullying, just like you said. Like, they're just putting people it's like a public shaming, like you said earlier. It just makes it easier for them to find something, like that YouTube guy, PewDiePie or something. I don't really see his stuff. I actually never seen it, but I was reading articles, and some of the videos that he had were, I guess they were labeled like anti-Semitic. Yeah. And I saw one of the videos. I took it as a joke. Like, you make jokes sometimes, and it's not like you mean them, But obviously there's certain. That's where it gets iffy. Like, there's certain things that you should probably not say. But, I mean, at what point do you start restricting yourself from actually expressing an idea? I mean, I believe if you give it power if you reject it. Like, if you...
Well, it breaks one of the fundamental things, about... Like, okay, people don't seem to understand that it's like, yes, you have the right to say anything. But another thing that's powerful about, orating in general is you have to know your audience then, too. I mean, that's kind of just a fundamental part of it. And I think that's one thing that people are seeming to forget entirely, or it's because we're being fed what our audience is. Our audience is a libtard. Our audience is a Trumpster, it's interesting to see the fact that, like, I don't know, people seem to... I think all that, like, what we're aiming for with the idea of even being PC is just understanding who you're understanding your audience in general, like, I think that's kind of the understanding, or at least I think that's, like, the ideal version of what that is. It's like understanding your audience. Your audience is going to always be extremely diverse. So it's just, it is just try not to piss off as many people as possible type of thing. Right. But, like, the idea that, it's interesting on what we want to then label hate speech, because I don't know, the way that I've always seen it is, it's like, if you are inciting violence against somebody, or if you are, I don't know, it's such a terrifying line to walk, and it's very interesting and very scary right now to see that line is being tested again. I mean, it's a good thing to see that the current, like, state of the country, like, most of it rejects that narrative, rejects that idea. But it's really scary to see that line being tested this way. I mean, you understand why people are pissed off that Ann Coulter is speaking at Berkeley. You understand why they're, pissed off that Milo Yiannopoulos is coming to Berkeley. They absolutely should have been allowed to, though. I mean, yeah, they have the platform to do that, and and you're right, you can protest all you want, but, like, it's scary to see that is censorship, and it's weird to find yourself then, feeling like, wait, you can't do that when it is something that repulsive, you know, like.
Yeah, it's fucking tricky. That's why it's such a sensitive thing to talk about. Just because, you know, even just the conversation between us, you know, people take things out of context,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, they can start assuming specific things, or getting ideas that you might mean something else. But in reality, you're just trying to make a clarification of things, and how do I say it? Just break it down, you know, because I mean, these are conversations that you need to have, and a lot of people don't want to have them. They just want to say, "I don't like how it sounds. I don't like how it makes me feel," and you know, fuck you. You know, there's no.
Well, it's so interesting to see that it is this "Make America Great Again" thing, but it's like, you know, what do you want to make it great again to? I mean, like. If it is that 1950s world, it's like that's a segregated world. That's also a world that's kind of just unattainable now. I mean, it's scary to see the idea that, you know, the kind of nationalist worship then, that it's like, to make America great again, you know, we have to have this one leader. Like, that is something that like causes alarm, I think, to a lot of people, you know. But the fact that like the fact that like Trump, I think it was South Park that was saying it. No, they had that great joke about the election where they were like, vote for Trump if you thought Star Wars The Force Awakens was great. Vote for Hillary if you think that it was a Happy Days rerun.
Happy Days rerun.
Yeah, but it's like, no, it's like, it is. It's this weird nostalgia then for this time then, this, you know, time in their childhood, but like this time then that they're speaking of, it does roll everything back on where the pendulum has swung, like the push to the left. Like, it's scary though to see them try to grab for so much though. I mean, like, you do have this feeling of like walking the razor's edge over this type of thing.
And I think what adds to it is not just the fact that they want to, I mean, sure, they want the values that were back in the 50s, but there's you know, the other part of the supporters that are racist.
Yeah.
You know, and that in itself is just creating a movement that, whether Trump you know, is, you know, intentionally doing or not, it's still creating that mood. You know, those people are being influenced by him, whether he means what he says or not.
Well, and it's still always been a very effective political tool throughout American history to harness, you know, that kind of rhetoric and that kind of white nationalist, white supremacist type of group. I mean, you know, they have always had their voice in politics. I mean, whether you want to, like, because it's interesting to see the extremism that does, you know, infiltrate through any type of political system. But we do need to deal with the fact that there is a deeply embedded, like, white supremacist, like, political movement, like that sentiment is still very much alive in America, and that was something that was born of, you know, the counterculture to the 1960s. This is, you know, essentially, you know, we're seeing a rebranding of that. It's being updated. They've, you know, gotten rid of the Confederate flag because they finally get it, you know. But, you know, what everybody fails to recognize, even about the whole Confederate flag controversies, it's like, no, that thing only popped up after the civil rights movement, and it was kind of just a way of, you know, of having a no blacks sign without getting in trouble. Yeah. Exactly. Like, that counterculture has never gone away. It's just, this is it finally evolving, and it's found its weird place in the Trump administration base.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. Like, you know, there's a lot of places that don't sell Nazi flags for the same reason, you know, that there was, you know, all the background attached to it. And I mean, if you were to compare them, which I don't really want to, but if you were, obviously, you know, the Confederate flag wasn't as bad, but of course it was as horrendous. But that flag is still able to be shown. It's still it's still flown. It's still sold at stores.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, and it's like, okay, I mean,
like the fact that we're having debates over, you know, removing Confederate monuments when it's like that. Why would they get a monument? They lost.
Yeah.
That is a participation trophy. Then, like, get rid of it.
A participation trophy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what they complain about.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, but I get the idea that it's part of the history. It's part of the, you know, the upbringing of the United States. You know, I mean, but there's a place where you can put them, make a museum where you can learn about these things, about why they happen and, you know, why they got removed and all that. But there's a place, you know, I understand that you can't hide what the past was.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But to accept it and to learn from what happened, I mean, that's completely different. And that's what I'm okay with. Like, if they remove them, put them, you know, somewhere where people can learn from them, you know, that's awesome. But
yeah, it's interesting to see because, like, you can see the argument then from the people who are in support of the monuments that are like, this is revisionist history.
Yeah.
It's like, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's like if that is I completely agree that it's like put it in a museum somewhere. Like, we need to understand that, like, this country's foundation was very complex, and there's still a lot of really raw emotion attached to the way that shook out in general, you know, like that seems to, like, I don't know, that, well, it goes back then, you know, to knowing your audience, like, and that's what I feel, you know, should be the greater goal of, like, essentially engaging in, you know, in dialogue with people. But, like, that's the thing that's really hard with trying to bridge this gap into this new counterculture then, is that it's hard to even understand how you give them, like, any leeway. Because, I mean, you have to give them enough room to express themselves, but, like...
yeah, enough, you know, rope them up enough so they can.
Yeah. Like, I had a friend who was really heavily into that movement, and we got into, like, a couple of heated debates, and he eventually blocked me.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. I mean, like, it sucked, because, like, I'd known the guy since high school, but, like, it was really weird to see him, like... Yeah. And it was interesting because he was, like, a libertarian who didn't openly support Trump, but still supported a lot of, like, the ideology and stuff. And, like, I don't know, it was so hard to argue with him, especially when he's, like, citing InfoWars as his source. And it's like, dude, you're citing... you're
Some
citing,
Alex Jones?
Yeah, Alex Jones. Like, I even argued to him that I was, like... Alex Jones said in court that it was performance art, you know? Yeah. And he was like, that's a gotcha statement. And I'm like, a gotcha statement is literally just a statement that you have to address. Like, I hate that that's become like an argument then now, like, oh, that's gotcha journalism. It's like, no, that's holding people accountable to what they've said. Like,
it's just, I think it's more important now than ever for, like, the press. Like, even like the newer ones, like there's a bunch of little outlets that are coming up, you know, to give you, like, alternative news, not fake news, but not even alternative news, how they'll, like, a lot of people refer to it.
Yeah.
But obviously other sources, more independent sources to get your news from.
Yeah. And,
you know, I see all these little outlets coming up, and, like, I think it's more important. Like, the CNN got fucked a few days ago because of that story that they retracted, you know, like the fake story.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that the press now has more... they make journalism, like, top priority, you know, because what's one of the things... Yeah,
the need for a free and independent press is important now, like, more than ever. Yeah. Like, we need investigative journalism, but we need journalism that can remain, you know, objective, like, and not necessarily... Like, you know, we basically have political pundits who are just the equivalent of, you know, tabloid gossipers at this point. Like, we need actual journalism. We need people to actually be held accountable. And that's one thing that's been so bizarre then in engaging with, you know, the current administration then, has been that we are getting these bizarre answers, and we are getting things that are, factually wrong or misinterpreted or misrepresented intentionally then, like the fact that we have this right then that is screaming about their First Amendment rights, but they're forgetting, rolled into that is freedom of the press. Like, that is part of freedom of expression. And that part is more important, like, now than ever, especially as we're facing, the fact that, like, geez, I think a couple of days ago I saw it making the rounds, some, story that William H. Macy had died or something, and it was like, no, it's a hoax, but like, we need actual objective journalism, and it's really become like an uphill battle in the age of this administration.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the news right now that I've noticed a lot is there's every other article that you look into, it's something criticizing Trump, and I don't see that as necessarily as a negative thing, but I think that it's because of all that negative press that he received now and during the presidential election is what got him to where he got now, because it solidified to his group, his followers, that the other side, the left,
that's CNN specifically.
CNN specifically, they legitimized what he was saying. Like, what he's saying is, they're just attacking you. It's just a bunch of bullshit, and they see it and they believe it. Yeah. And again, they're just shooting themselves in the fucking foot.
Well, it's interesting because it's such a paranoid idea that absolutely everything else is lying to you. So blatantly like that. Like, it's kind of it's a very like it's kind of a very new phenomenon in politics then, to have such a small group be the only people backing the president who will accept nothing but what he says. Like, it's
like if it was like the truth and nothing but the truth, right?
Yeah. When no, they can. Like, fine, they don't necessarily have, like, hard evidence at the moment, I suppose, that will connect Trump to the Russia thing. But it's like, there's enough, like...
Yeah, there's enough already.
There's enough to be like, okay, let's just take a look at this, make sure nothing's fishy, because Michael Flynn had to resign. Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's interesting that, like... Because I feel that we need to pump the brakes because of like that, and that Jeff Sessions said he had to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. Like, but it's interesting that we've become so divided then that me saying like, wait, we need to look at that immediately then would label me, you're a leftist.
Yeah, right. Like, you can't question what's going on. Either side. I mean, side, you can't question something because either you're a bigot or you are a libtard.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, what the fuck? I just want to question things, and I want to, you don't have to be on one side. You don't have to be on one side. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people. Like, once again, the tribalism, their home team, like, they have to be there, because if not, they're just on the bandwagon or something.
Yeah, but like, the polarization has gotten so bad that like, you can't necessarily have anything a la carte. There is really no middle ground representation in American politics, especially when there really needs to be. Like, we need a third party just to act as like a mediator almost, like.
So I'm not entirely sure, but let's say we try to get a third party in there. Like, what will it take? Just like the money to finance the campaign? It would take
the actual appeal to a large enough base to, I mean, Sanders was a pretty good example of being able to get a campaign driven entirely by donation. Like, this country, I think, is still very much capable of supporting an option. It's the fact that we can't get behind the right person still. We're still too divided on so many things, like.
Yeah, I mean, which is why he ran as a Democrat, right? Because he was trying to run.
Because he wanted the nomination. He wanted the support of the DNC in order to run against Trump. Because that's long been standing. Like you need to run as something. Independents pop up here and there, but they still don't do that well. I mean, like they're still definitely a minority within the broader American representation in Congress.
But this election, this 2016 one, I think it saw one of the highest percentages for a third party, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It did see some of the highest. It was still one of the lowest turnouts ever, though.
Yeah. You mentioned it was what, 40? No,
46% sat out, and then it was like two separate quarters with some change all voting. But it was a large amount that voted for a third party. Mm-hmm. But it definitely hurt Clinton because it was in basically every swing state that like Obama had carried previously. Yeah.
I think I was hearing that there's a possibility. I don't think it's true, but there's a possibility that she might run for a third time.
I don't know.
I was like,
only time will tell at this point. I mean, we'll see if she would run. We'll see if that's actually kind of what I'm afraid of. It's like I don't know, because I was a very big supporter of Bernie Sanders. I thought he had a lot of really good ideas. I'm worried if he's gonna be able to make another run after that, and I'm afraid then that like that will, without him running, I'm afraid we'll lose momentum. Because I definitely feel that like being 2017, I feel like we are kind of on the precipice of a weird repetition of history. But it was during this time then, almost 100 years, that you saw a lot of social movements like come into play. Like you saw things actually change. I mean, I feel like it is very fascinating to live in this time right now because we do stand at such a divided point in our history, but it also like at such a turning point. But I do feel like we as a social kind of group, as like a as we've become more connected, we are kind of beginning to be slightly more, we have the potential to be more compassionate. Like I think we're going to see, especially in American politics, a resurgence of specifically progressive ideas, especially as this next wave of younger representation starts to get in there.
And that's what I kind of see. I see Trump's president. We see the surge in the increase in these type of behaviors, like hate behaviors and racist stuff. But at the same time, I feel like the culture that represents, I guess, the progressive ideas of America, they're becoming more compassionate. More. They're more open to the idea of including others. Because of the same hate that's coming up, we're learning to become more compassionate.
I almost very much feel that like we're kind of just in like the death grasp of the old kind of way of thinking, the old world. I mean, it's still there, and it's this reaction, this election was very much a reaction then to that change. But this could very much be that like death thrall, like this
like the resistance that's just waiting to break through.
But this could definitely then be what at least brings us together to actually, I don't know, start talking to one another. I mean, that is something that is kind of fascinating with politics right now, that like, for instance, the health bill has stalled and they're putting it off till after the 4th of July recess, but it's because they've had so much defection within their own ranks. They still have not approached Democrats on this bill at all, but I'm thinking that like, if we are at least optimistic in this situation, that maybe this will force people to start talking to one another, which would kind of help to break down that polarization, which would kind of help to break down the tribal mentality. Like, it's the idea of working, as a village and not as a tribe, I suppose. But
exactly,
we do have to admit to ourselves, that we still have these undercurrents in this country, and they are a learned attitude. But it's like you can make progress, but it's like understand, having a teachable moment and going further to, actively shame or humiliate somebody, in that teaching moment. Like,
Yeah, that's...
yeah, like, you don't, like, the whole public shaming thing, I suppose, is what I'm speaking to in that, and the reaction, the mob mentality reaction we see, especially on social media from both sides, that it's like, I think we need to scale back the rhetoric so that we don't want blood immediately. Like, that's something that hasn't been addressed, is that, like, the country, I believe, is reaping what it sowed, and we've been sold, from two different parties now. Things are terrifying and bad, and everybody wants to hurt you. And on the left, we've been hearing, well, these guys are kind of crazy. We're at least not them. And we've like, I don't know, that's what's caused this kind of chaos that we're in now. Like, we've been sold, like, the left is pissed off at its leadership because nothing has gotten better, and the right is pissed off for kind of the same reasons it's been pissed off for the last,
and
decade.
Pissed off because of the left complaining.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's no conversation. But again, like, if you look back in history, since the formation of the United States, in a way, I feel like, I'm hoping it doesn't head that way, but I feel like there's going to be some sort of collision. There's going to be a point, like 9/11, whether people believe it happened or not, like the fact that, months after that, like the mood of the country, they stood unified, whether what they did it was wrong or not, and going to war, like the country unified itself for one particular cause,
Yeah.
But I think that there might be something like that happening again, and it's scary to think of because you don't know, and you wouldn't want it to happen, but I feel like it's leading up to that.
Well, America should pay attention, especially to the fact that, like, when it comes to terrorism in modern America now, a decade, almost two removed from 9/11, the majority of attacks have all been from within.
Exactly.
They've all been...
domestic.
Yeah, they've all been domestic terrorists. They've all been people who were radicalized by rhetoric. Like, we spend millions of dollars to fight terrorism, and it's fueled by people with hardcore rhetoric that appeals, to people at their most desperate moment. And we like to pretend then that in, America, that we haven't been holding people accountable to that. We've been fighting a war then, essentially, against extremist ideology while ignoring the own polarized extremist ideology within our own country for decades now. Yeah.
And it's got to, right, there hasn't been any social reform, for a while. I mean, in a grander scale, like little things get passed here and there, but, something as big as a civil rights movement, like, I don't see, there hasn't been anything similar to that, as huge as that. Has there?
Well, the most recent, I suppose, advancement, obviously, then is gay marriage rights. And we've then seen, progress on actual protections then for that community, but at the same time, we're seeing a pushback to that as well now. I mean, this is all part of dismantling, the Obama legacy. Granted, a lot of this is entirely symbolic. I mean, the next president could just come right in, sign all of this, and overturn it, but it's interesting to see something, one, that seems to be so actively done out of like spite, like it still definitely shows that there's still a lot to be done in order to, I don't know, ensure protection for, these people, for these communities, because, some would say that gay marriage, that's a big thing on the right, like it's gone too far now. And, the bathroom bills, that's going too far. It's like, no, I mean, we need most change, obviously, then socially, if you've paid attention to, I don't know, America in the last century, there was like most change had to be, enforced by a federal law. Like there is still...
Yeah, the government had to step in to...
Yeah, to ensure somebody's rights were not violated then. And that's something we need to understand, especially as we're seeing them actively then chisel away at federal rights, at, bathroom bills and things like that. Like the fact that we're going to see very soon here, I believe in the fall, they're bringing the bakery case from Oregon, the baker who refused to bake cakes for a gay wedding. That's going to the Supreme Court. And that could be, that's kind of another test on, the moral soul of America, I guess, is to see how this shakes out.
Fuck.
Because, if he is granted to be in the right, then that does essentially set
like a precedent for
it sets precedent then for the actual... It's essentially a law favoring a theology then, which is so fascinating that, that's the type of thing that this is boiling to. The fact that we have the travel ban, being specifically targeting Muslim countries. They eventually figured out that the administration just had to stop calling it a Muslim ban, and it would eventually get passed, apparently.
Fucking retarded.
Yeah, but like... what we're still seeing this this favoritism to a religion. We're seeing this, I don't know, this terror of this terror and this targeting of a specific religion, while at the same time trying to claim our own religious liberty, is essentially what this kind of test is boiling down to. And if this man is able to deny that service because it violates his faith, like it opens up like such a can of worms then.
Yeah, right. For any other person who feels that they, if it oversees what's the word? If it's not within their beliefs, right? Like in this case, if he's, because of...
There are people then who could claim they don't want to work on Sundays then, because that is against their religion. Yeah. Like it fundamentally, I would say, breaks, one of the core tenets that this country was, founded on, and that's that we cannot make laws that favor any religion.
Right.
Like, and that's what I feel is, is morally at stake.
Isn't that where that separation of church and state comes in?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And, that's another front that we have to be aware of because of the Trump administration looking to repeal the Johnson era protections on church groups donating to political causes. Like, they understand that kind of power, but it's kind of sad to see religious liberty as a message be perverted in that way to essentially, allow a person to deny somebody, to discriminate against another person. I mean, that is what it boils down to. One could argue too that if Baker didn't want to bake the cake, he just could have refused service. And isn't that a sign in every restaurant?
Yeah,
anyway?
You have the right to refuse service
to anyone. It makes me wonder. I don't know. Maybe we need to look at, I don't know.
Yeah, it gets weird.
It's all what did the guy say to him? He made, somebody made it about
the gay thing.
Yeah, about this person's sexual orientation, and it's that's where it crosses the line. I don't know. But that's what freaks me out, because, I want to be, I suppose, the type of person that believes, your rights end where another person's begins, type of thing. So it's I don't know. This court case will be such a lightning rod, and it will, I don't know, it'll be a moral test for this country to see, do we stick by our guns, or are we saying, you can refuse to do something if it's against your religious belief.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little complicated with the way things are sometimes, but that's one of the good things about this, you know, like the country in itself, like the idea of the government itself, that you have the right to, you know, fight for these kind of rights.
Yeah, we're still, you know, we're still one of the greatest, like, experiments, like, ever in how to, you know...
fucking manage millions of people.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of scary where we are right now, just because the rhetoric, it's the rhetoric of the times, and it's the fact that we have to, you know, accept that what we've been sowing for the last 2 decades, like, that's just what's coming home to roost, and like, you can't scare the shit out of people for 2 decades and then expect them not to panic, you know?
Well, I mean, that's why we have memes to cope with the fear.
Yeah, exactly.
With all the fucking stuff that's going on.
That's why we have memes and cats, photos of cats. Apparently, that's what America likes.
Funny times, man.
Yeah.
But I think it's about that time, Rob.
Yeah.
So I mean, once again, I mean, hopefully, we'll see where things go. You know, people just need to start creating conversation, and you know, I don't know, just start somewhere that's not screaming or clashing violently.
Yeah, well, it's like it is just. It's hard because it's listen, don't react, you know, like listen to them, hear what they have to say, but then, you know, you have to, it's a conversation, but we both sides have to be willing to sit down to have it in the first place, you know, like, and right now we've seriously hit a point where nobody's talking to each other.
Well, let's hope that changes, because we still have another 3 years of Trump, hopefully not 8.
We'll have to see. Like, we will absolutely have to see.
But like you said, it's just like a bottleneck until we explode into something farther progressive.
Yeah, I absolutely think that. Like, I think that the thing that was sparked with Sanders, and the fact that, you know, we see people moving toward the idea of single payer. The fact now too that, like, even with, you know, the Affordable Care Act, like, that was a major step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Like,
besides its faults and stuff.
Yeah, I think we are, at least as a country, starting to wake up to some of the responsibilities that we have been neglecting as a nation for far too long. Yeah.
It's awesome. I mean, there's little progress, but it's going.
Yep.
And I really do think if it would have been Bernie against Trump, Bernie would have for sure won, because they were both political outsiders. I mean, not Bernie, but, you know, he was outside the establishment, what the establishment was.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Stood for.
Well, you know, and he definitely, he was, the things that that the left was definitely looking for, at least a lot of the progressive left was looking for, the ones who didn't come out to vote, who didn't vote for Clinton in the end, then, like, he definitely embodied, and I think awoke people to... Actually, it's interesting to think about the rise of Trump specifically as a candidate, in that we also had Bernie then, who was saying things that politicians hadn't been saying ever. The idea that, you know, I'm hoping that, he's awoken the social conscience of the country, and that, you know, from there we can actually start to demand change and actually, you know, live in the greatest nation on earth. I mean...
Right. I mean, it is. I mean, it's people want to say, oh, it's all the stuff that happens, but I mean, it is the concept. What it was built on is, you know, it's like one of the biggest civilizations in history as well. You know, like, you know, with the justice system, or the system of the government that was
the economic system itself. I mean, like, it's. I still have, like, faith that the country can, I don't know, the country can find its way. Yeah.
It will. It's America. All right. Well, Rob, thanks for coming out, man.
Absolutely, man.
We'll catch you around, and everybody else, thank you guys for tuning in. This was the Social Primate Podcast. Till next time.
'cause I